All right. I'm gonna kick off. Thank you all so much for joining our latest L1 AMA. So for those joining us for the first time today or new here, this is basically a regular virtual meetup that we host on a fairly regular bi-weekly or so basis on the LAMINA1 Discord, where we kind of update the community on what we're working on and answer questions about some of the ongoing initiatives we've been developing and how they fit into the digital landscape and, our vision for the open metaverse at large. Um, as I'm sure you guys can tell by the invite for today's AMA, the topic today is cryptography, aka the math behind the chain, and basis of this year's L1 Cryptography Challenge, which we released last week alongside two new papers Mario published, detailing some of the unique encryption and scaling solutions we've been building behind the scenes at LAMINA1. Joining me today, as I mentioned, is our chief in-house cryptographer, Mario Yaksetig. He's both the architect of the papers and the majority of challenges in this year's activation. So if you're frustrated or mad at trying to solve something, you can blame him. Um, anyway, how are you doing today, Mario? Are you ready to dive in?
Showtime. I'm always ready for this type of stuff. I'm always very excited to answer people's questions and to help as much as I can. And if you want to complain, you can send me a DM complaining.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, we understand. We'll definitely dive kind of deeper into the challenges as we go on. I think for anyone tuning in today that hasn't really been keeping up with the announcements or has no idea what we're talking about, before we get too deep into the world of cryptography, I'm just going to drop a couple of articles here. The first is the sort of blog post that lays out what we'll be talking about today. As well as, the challenges that we're going to be talking about. And I'm also going to link two of the papers in the chat that we use to kind of inform this week's education and challenges as well. The first is a paper called A Trust Minimized eCash for Cryptocurrencies. And the second one is called Insights from Building a Blockchain-Based Metaverse. Now, for folks who haven't read these, both of these docs are super fascinating looks. The first one that I shared is kind of some new solutions that we've been working on behind the scenes. And then the second one is kind of a retrospective on a lot of the building that we've been doing together over the last year and a half. Both are very beautifully written, really like layout in what I consider super understandable language, kind of like a lot of the stuff that, you might not see every day interacting on the hub, but is really forming the foundation of the protocol we're building. Um, I think before we dive in, Mario, do you mind giving me just kind of like a quick overview of like what each paper is about and like how we used them to inspire some of these challenges?
Absolutely, yeah. So just to give more context to this, my first cryptographer kind of like mentor was David Schaum. David was a big icon and is still a big icon in the cryptography space. And he it's very fascinating. He's very, 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 very sharp. And as I was working with him, he's the creator of eCash, and I was always like, how can we kind of use his technology and make it better and more applicable to blockchain? Obviously, don't tell him this. I hope he hasn't really read the paper yet, because I'm kind of my goal with that is to make his original design better. But I haven't told him yet. That's going to be a fun discovery.
Literally
So what we
tagged
tried to do,
it today.
yeah. What we
Sorry.
were imagine what we were trying to do is to kind of grab this primitive from back in the 80s, and that was implemented then in the 90s, but it was more done so in a centralized manner. So I was thinking, okay, it's a very powerful primitive, but it's not really perfectly aligned with what we have today and the blockchain ethos. Can we make that better? And I think we did, right? So right now, I think the paper is just a centralized, we kind of add more transparency to an eCash solution, but we're also exploring kind of like decentralizing that signing process. So I wouldn't be, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm going to post like a version 2.0 or if I'm going to update this one here that you're seeing. Not much changes cryptographically speaking. but we want to decentralize the issuance a bit. So long story short, the way eCash works from back in the day is you go to an issuer, you basically give him a number that is blinded. So like the guy doesn't really know what number it is. That other issuer signs it, returns it back to you, and then you can kind of take that blinding factor out and you have like a spendable coin. But that person can issue as many coins as they want because it's super centralized, it's very opaque, you have no idea what's happening there. You may trust it because it's a bank. Right, so what we did here was we kind of tied issuance with withdrawals on chain. So now we kind of have a transparent issuance, and even the spending process with that guy was to mint money out of thin air. He would not be able to spend it because he wouldn't be able to generate like a zero knowledge proof of spending. That's kind of like the big idea there. Again, feel free to DM me. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to go over like the whole paper now. I think that's a good intro. Then the other one was one thing we discuss a lot internally is we have a lot of cryptography going on. And I always talk with Ivy and I'm like, I feel like we're not really telling the world enough of what we're doing. And even we have very interesting discussions with Neil, right? Neil Stevenson. There's a lot of fun stuff happening. And we wanted to kind of set the tone on what we have learned and to tell other people what they should know before they kind of embark on this adventure of building something that is metaverse oriented on a blockchain. And I really liked how that paper turned out. It's very easy to read, so I didn't really add a lot of math there. It was mostly very insightful, like why we made those decisions, what is hard, what is easy, what is very tricky, and how we are doing that. That is probably the most fun paper. It's a very informative paper. We are waiting for that to hopefully be accepted in a journal, by the way.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, again, like I reading that paper, I think Mario and I talked about wanting to do another cryptography week just to kind of start telling that behind the scenes story. And he just whips out this paper, that second one that I posted. And I was like, where has this been the whole time? So honestly, like
Exactly.
anyone who hasn't dove into it looking for clues for our cryptography challenges this week and wants just like a really strong overview of all of the sort of like interesting things we've been researching, definitely check out that paper. I'll be resharing the heck out of it over the coming weeks. All right. So I don't want to spend too much time on setup because we did get a ton of community questions. We got kind of over 400 into the survey this week from folks participating in challenges. And yeah, I think I've kind of broken up everyone's questions into kind of three buckets. First is just kind of like background around, what Mario does all day and like what cryptography kind of means in the context of LAMINA1 as a whole. From there, we're going to dive into the sort of like concepts behind some of the challenges that Mario kind of pulled together. And then, as promised, at the end of the AMA, I've got some very sort of like specific questions, solicitations for hints, even on how to solve some of the tougher challenges. And I think, we've given you about a week to solve these almost entirely on your own, although Mario has been in the chat helping people out. But we'll dive in a little bit deeper here. So if you're racking your brain on one of these issues, definitely stay tuned. And if you have any sort of like questions or want Mario to start guiding you in the right direction for any of these, feel free to drop them into the chat while we're going through some of these initial questions. Um, I think the first question, though, I want to field by you, Mario, is basic. So what exactly do you do all day as a cryptographer for LAMINA1? Like, what does the job entail on a day-to-day basis?
This is such a fun question. When I was thinking about this question, I was even like, okay, because kind of like go around a bit. I do a lot of different things. So cryptography is a very broad field. And like during my career, I became like with a lot of like I worked on so many different things within the cryptography field, and I've always wanted to be a specialist. And then I kind of ended up becoming a specialist indeed, but in a couple of more things than I originally wanted. And when I first saw this question, I was like, okay, let's kind of like try to dissect my days. And the truth is, my days are very different. It depends on a lot on my mood. So, and with that being said, is basically the mood only changes one thing. It's the order of things I do in a day. So I either do protocol design, which is the thing I like the most, is you give me a problem, and that may very well be we are creating a metaverse experience. You have a wallet, and I would like to buy an NFT privately on this specific experience. And then I would create an actual protocol to make that happen. Like, how can we allow, let's use Alchemist because he's always the enemy, first person that comes to my mind. How could Alchemist buy a specific NFT without revealing his actual wallet, right? This is very important. It's a very fundamental primitive on the internet. So that would be the protocol design. But then the burden, that's my favorite part. The burden with protocol design is that you then have to prove its security. That's the hardest part. So when a paper deadline is coming up, that's what I have to do. So I spent a couple of days writing the security proofs. I'm not really a big fan of that, but that's part of the job. A fun part of the work as well, I am an applied cryptographer, so I'm not so much on the math and just papers. I like to code a bit. So we've been coding a lot of proof of concepts of these ideas, right? How is performance? How does it scale? What does deployment look like? Especially usability. So at Lamina1, we care a lot about usability. So we don't want to give you just something that is super secure, but then no one can really use it. So we still do very secure things, but we make it very usable for you. And I'm not sure if we even revealed that one. We have a big announcement for wallets, like the wallets for the hub. That's kind of basically all of these three things. So we designed the protocol, we proved its security, we implemented it. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's the life of a cryptographer. The order of those changes, but that's basically those three building blocks. Either design protocols, prove its security, or implement them.
Wow. Okay. Alchemist 19 actually, since you shouted him out, he asked, why cryptography? Like, I'm sure you could have studied any other area of mathematics, but like, what is it about cryptography that makes your heart sing?
So this is actually a very interesting thing because I was not supposed to go down the cryptography path. So I studied electrical engineering back in the day. And then I specialized, my master's was in telecommunications engineering. So I thought I wanted to be a computer networks engineer. But then literally in the last semester before my master thesis, I had a class called cryptography. And it was fantastic because there was a substitute professor there who is, I believe, the best cryptographer in Portugal. Shout out, I'm from Portugal originally. And his class was fascinating. So I was like, no, it's not computer networks I want, it's this. This is my future. And then I was one of the highest grades of that class. And he was always mad at me because I always took like weird shortcuts to to solve the homeworks. They would still work, but it was like faster ways, almost like a little sneaky shortcut. And which I love that I did that. He wasn't very happy because I didn't really think inside the box as per his assignments, but I always solved the assignments properly. And yeah, that's how I ended up being a cryptographer. And then I worked with David Chaum like right after that, and it was all only reassuring. So that was basically it. But I think I'll always be a cryptographer for the rest of my life.
Yeah, like what year was that, Mario?
Oof, like 16, 2016.
There you go. Fascinating. Okay, Killen's got a question now. He asks, what fuels you to do your work, particularly at Lamina1? Like, why is it vital to the future? And how do you think we can get people excited about it as a whole? So, I mean, you kind of talked a little bit about like, our engineers kind of giving you a challenge and you sort of investigating it, but like, what are the biggest priorities that like you've been looking into, I guess, over the like last year? And like, why is it important to look into
So
those
this
or,
is this is literally my biggest motivator. So
uh-huh.
I fundamentally believe the internet is a bit broken. So I'm not really a big fan of how kind of like the internet works. It's a bit of a mess with all the passwords, like all of the data that we're leaking. Everything is kind of a bit broken, and maybe I'm being nice with a bit. I guess it works well at the same time. And for me, when I think of Lamina1 and how we are dealing with the metaverse, is basically we have the chance of rewriting what exists today. Kind of like we are changing the rules of the game and we have to change them properly, right? So we want to allow, I mean, if you want to have one alias account on a specific platform and then your original account on another platform, managing a lot of like username and passwords is not really ideal. So we're doing a lot of fun stuff around identity, around allowing people to kind of make their lives way easier on what the internet should look like. Like sometimes it's always a pain, even for me. Every time I have to pay some of the like the utilities at the end of the month, I'm like, okay, what is my password for the electricity company? What's my password for like the water company? And it's always a mess for me. So I'm very motivated to kind of change how the world works
Hmm.
and making it super fun on the metaverse. So how can you have your items secure? How can you have a login easier for you? How can you change from experience to experience very easily and smoothly? Even just a quick fun story. I used to play RuneScape back in the day, and I fell for a scam where they would. I was very young, and that's also the type of stuff I'm trying to prevent with with changing the metaverse and the internet.
Amazing. I feel like that's so fascinating to hear you say that because I feel like you would expect like, oh, I'm a cryptographer. I'm very interested in security and I'm very interested in like building like more powerful protocols and for you it's like, no, I want to make the internet like a better place that doesn't suck so much, which is I just
Exactly.
That's amazing. I got a question sort of related. I think you were about to dive in here, but I'd love for you to dive deeper from Snegkoff that just kind of asks like, what's so special about Lamina1's cryptography that like other projects don't have? Like, how is your work like different?
So I'll just say this. In all the protocols we have designed, no one else has done it, which is very impressive. So traditionally people ask me like, "Oh, I'm looking for a protocol to do this." And I go like, "Oh, no, that's you can kind of use this stuff that is already out there to do that." At Lamina, that hasn't happened, and that's super fun. It's, "Oh, we are trying." I cannot reveal too much because I know some of these are announcements for Will pretty soon. But Will wants to do some fun stuff with NFTs and kind of like some stuff around ownership of NFTs, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe I'm already saying too much, but how can we make the cryptographic proof for that? And they're like, okay, this is a fun thing. And then we kind of have to brainstorm back and forth. Then we have to align with engineering. That's also traditionally kind of hard because stuff on the theoretical realm works very well, but then not necessarily out in the wild when it's fully coded. So you kind of have to take those trade-offs, but you still need to keep security. You cannot really just fully compromise. I think we have super exciting things on usable security. So for the first time ever, and especially with the wallet announcements that we have coming up, and I think we're gonna have an AMA just on that. That wallet technology, for example, that will allow us to completely mitigate phishing attacks. So you will not be exposed to a phishing attack at all. And that is massive. That is massive. So yeah, we have a lot of fun cryptography that other projects don't have. And I'm trying to write it more and more. And just a little sneak peek announcement. I actually published another paper this week on the IACR ePrint. So we basically created a way to have stronger elliptic curve signatures. And then if a hacker steals your key, you're able to prove that that signature was not produced by you, which is pretty, like, it's a pretty strong thing that doesn't exist out there either. So yeah, I mean, I hope that's enough. I mean, it's plenty of exciting for me. So I hope it's for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, we will definitely all crack into all of this stuff as soon as we're ready to go live. But yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is exciting. Mario and I had a big conversation before Cryptography Week on like which papers am I allowed to publicize and which papers am I not? But yeah, there's more coming. I do think though, like kind of getting out of the background stuff, we did get a ton of questions about the challenges themselves this week. So I want to dive in to our next kind of set of questions. I think the first question we've been getting quite a lot in various sort of ways that people are writing it out. But Yajika asks, why do you give such difficult tasks? Like, what is the reason for bringing back the cryptography challenge, and like, why are they so hard?
So we got a lot of good feedback from Cryptography Week 1, and a lot of people complained that it was too easy. So we were like, okay, let's spice it up a bit. And so we are asking, people have been asking us also to have harder questions. So I think we can probably commit to Cryptography Week 3 now, Ivy. But
Oh
what
yeah.
we
I mean,
will,
most popular community initiative that we had last year. Like we had that like quiz at the end of the year asking what people's favorite challenge was, and Cryptography Week was not both the number one most popular initiative we did and the number one least popular initiative we did. So it's fine.
so yeah, basically this one had harder questions, but that was intended and requested by the community. Mm, I mean, there were some very accessible ones there as well, but expect things to get a bit harder and also easier, kind of like very good balance, right? That would be the answer I have for this. But if you have any like things that you would like to ask, like to see in Cryptography Week 3, feel free to reach out and we can probably make that happen.
Yeah, totally. I think like upping the ante of the difficulty was definitely feedback that we took. And but I think also like, knowing that we need kind of a scale of problems is really good feedback that I've taken to heart through this. I also do want to say one of the reasons why I wanted to run the cryptography challenge right now in particular is, as many of you guys know, we are rapidly kind of like moving to close up Betanet and move towards mainnet. And so over the next couple of weeks, I'm, going to be launching some quests and stuff just kind of designed to help creators, builders, developers, people across the L1 community just chances to kind of ramp up their XP before we make the transition. Just to, give again, like our most active and engaged community members a little bit of an edge as we're kind of reaching this big milestone. So I think, if you're not a big coder or a big developer and, a lot of these challenges are hard for you, like definitely stay tuned. This is just one flavor of quests we're going to be releasing, but I think, questing hugely important on our platform. I know a lot of you are super, super competitive about the leaderboard, and we definitely wanted to give, some of them, some folks, some of the quieter folks and coders in the L1 Discord who might not be, engaging and talking every day, a chance to also kind of participate and ramp up XP in kind of a different way beyond, your more basic crypto sharing quests and all of that kind of stuff. So again, just trying to have like well-rounded quests and also to help a lot of you guys ramp up as we move towards a really exciting time that we're moving towards. Um, got a question for you, Mario, from Zolotsi, who asks, like, is cryptography only available to professionals, or like, can beginners start to learn it too? And like, how? Like, if someone's really trying to participate in this challenge, but like is just starting out with this, like, what would you recommend as an expert in this field?
So you can 100% learn it no matter where you are. The learning curve may be a bit steeper or not, also depending on the type of cryptography you want to do, right? So and that's very important. So if you want to go down like the zero knowledge engineer path, that may take a while depending on your prerequisites. If you have maybe some math background, some software development background, you are good. Other than that, you may have to study a bit more. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't learn it at all. Like when I first started, I was like a very, very big newbie. It was it was so scary. Like doing my master thesis and talking with David, like he has tens of thousands of citations per paper, like one of the biggest icons of cryptography in the world. And I was like, oof, I don't really know anything. I only had like one class. So anyone can do it. And that's actually pretty funny because right after this AMA, I was going to talk with some people internally, but I would like to start like a ZK fellowship and a cryptography fellowship at L1. And that because we're also almost reaching a point where these cryptography weeks are almost like interview questions. So that's a pretty fun. It's a pretty. If you're solving these AMAs, these questions, you are on a very good track. I'll say that because these are you can easily pass like cryptography one.
Amazing. Well, you know, I've got a list of all of the folks who've solved them. So, yeah, you heard it here. Mario's keeping an eye on anyone who's able to solve a bunch of these challenges. Got some more specific questions now. I think like as we kind of dive deeper into this AMA, the questions are going to get a little bit more technical. So I got one from Jojo85, kind of asking about one of our challenges, the sort of brute force challenge, brute force hashing challenge number 4, which is kind of like, or I think it was 3, but it was one of the kind of easier ones on the end of at the kickoff of the challenge, but they ask, what techniques are the most effective in preventing brute force attacks on modern encryption algorithms? So obviously that challenge kind of just shows that like if you reveal a little bit too much information about like a hash that's used to encrypt someone's data, you can brute force it and crack it pretty easily. So like, how do you prevent that from happening in like the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a real big problem out there. So many people, and I'll give you a dual in the real world. Many people use weak passwords. So it's very common to see like passwords with the dollar signs and stuff like that, right? And often people just try to brute force that and see if they can log in. Traditionally, what you do is you just add some randomness to that slot. So whatever like people user is registering, you have kind of like an additional piece of randomness, and then to try to brute force, you need to add that randomness in and like do the whole computation yourself. But that doesn't necessarily prevent the attack itself. Like if it's only like a pin, like the exercise we did in the quest, right? In the like the cryptography week, you would still be broken anyway. There's a couple of tricks you can do. So the other day I actually came up with like an interesting idea of doing like a sequential computation for logging in, just so that it kind of takes longer for everyone. But if the long story short, if the entropy is too low, so if it's very weak stuff that you're hashing or encrypting, you may not necessarily be golden. It may be kind of hard. If you're doing symmetric encryption, you are probably okay, or like you are okay because that kind of like masks a lot. You don't know the key that you're using to like encrypt, so the brute forcing there is always hard, no matter what, whether you're encrypting a zero or a big book. But if you're hashing, which is kind of like a symmetric primitive as well, the best shot you have is either doing sequential computation. So if you look at key derivation functions and adding some randomness in the stuff that you're hashing.
Hmm. Okay. We've got another one. Actually, we had a bunch of people ask about this, and I feel like from reading how common this question was, it seems like an existential problem in the world of cryptography. So I'm excited to hear how you answer this. But I think Jack Rural articulated it the best. But she asks, what kind of things do you think about as a cryptographer that might be ways to encrypt data that's like resistant to advances in quantum cryptography? So like, is this a race between the number of states that need to be simultaneously considered, or are there other factors? So basically like quantum cryptography is a little bit scary. Computers are getting faster and faster and better at solving stuff. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on these advances and how are we going to stay ahead of it?
This is a great question because I used to do a bit of post-quantum crypto a while ago. So essentially speaking, you have uh, two verticals to address here. One is symmetric encryption and hashing. So that is pretty much secure. All right. So if you do just a regular encryption with a single key that works both to encrypt and decrypt, so like literally it's symmetric on both ends, that is safe against quantum computers because we know what most of the attacks are. So like kind of like these algorithms to break cryptography have already been devised a couple decades ago, kind of like what can a quantum computer do? And you know, for example, that a quantum computer can break uh, wallet, the cryptocurrency wallet. So if you sign, right, so if you just sign a message, it doesn't even matter what you sign. The moment you expose like your actual public key, a quantum computer can get your secret key. Quantum computer has to be big enough, right? So it's not the one that is out there already. To do that, to prevent that type of stuff, you need to use post-quantum crypto. What exactly to use? Uh, it's probably not for me to say right now in this call. I'm very skeptical of kind of like exactly what I recommend. I actually got into a Twitter fight recently with a guy that is behind many of the standards that are being approved now by kind of like the US government. And it was pretty interesting because then some people started taking my side as well. So I was like, okay, I'm not the only skeptical person here. But there are a couple of things you can do, and I'm trying to work a lot with that type of stuff. The thing I like the most is to ensure that we can have like a quantum private transcript. So kind of like the info that we put on the chain is secure in the sense that no one can really reverse what you're doing. And then if it's very sensitive things, we want to hide that even against a quantum computer. So if a quantum computer appears 50 years from now, there are certain things that they cannot really open or read.
Hmm. Next question for you from a username that starts with 361229 and then cascades into a bunch of other random numbers, who asks, cryptography is good, but it will always have a vulnerability, the human factor. Do you see ways and do you have solutions in case of such a force majeure so that if something happens, you can always say, funds are SAFU?
So you are literally, whoever asked this question is literally gonna like love the type of work I'm doing. I'm literally only working or mostly working on this. I call it extremely adversarial cryptography because I'm helping people have mechanisms to claim ownership of stuff or to like defend themselves against hackers and can even steal your key. And the wallet announcement we have, for example, is exactly this. A user can be super careless, can click on the phishing attack, can click on the link, can sign the transaction. The bad guy thinks they're going to get all of their funds, all of these people, the victims' funds, all of the NFTs, all of everything, and the transaction will not pass. So this is actually my favorite type of cryptography. I call it extremely adversarial because it's very hard for people to kind of like deal with this type of stuff. But we have great designs. So the paper I just published this week is a good example of that.
Awesome. Okay. Now we're getting into it's 12:35. Got a bunch of questions, hints, and how to solve. So we are officially moving into the hints and how to solve section of this AMA. I think to kind of start out, I want to start with kind of an overview. So Supreme5220 asks, which ciphers or challenges are the most difficult? Like what kind of like gradation have we set up with this challenge design? And like, do you have any sort of just like top line tips on how to go about each challenge in the sort of 7 that we rolled out?
So which one is the most difficult? I guess it ends up being a bit subjective because what I thought was the most difficult didn't really end up being the most difficult, I guess. For me, the most difficult was probably the nonce exposure one. The tips I have for people are basically to focus on the math of the operations. So each like traditionally cryptography is basically math. So people are use math to secure themselves, whether that's the messages they send, their funds, or to hide the contents of the messages they're sending. And each of those operations has a specific formula that is well vetted and well studied because everyone tries to break things. So if you look at the math and you try traditionally, if you kind of like repeat, uh, if you misuse something and if you repeat a specific number, right? So one of the examples we used was the nonce reuse. That was a problem that happened with the PlayStation. So that is something that is actually given in the in cryptography classes a lot as an example. Yeah, that's the tip I would have to solve. I mean, there's also plenty of information out there on how to solve these things. I'm not necessarily saying people to cheat, but just to kind of get the intuition on what you have to do, right? So you have two equations, and now you have two constants that you know that can help you solve like those equations. That would be the intuition there.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely have gotten anecdotal reports that unfortunately, your problems cannot yet be solved by ChatGPT. So sorry, guys.
That's good. That's good.
Um, Winesome asks, any hints for the third quest in particular?
So,
Uh,
give me which one is the third one? Sorry.
So yeah, challenge number 3 is the hash brute forcing challenge. So I'll post a link to it in the chat here now. Yeah, sounds like it's an interesting one. I think so far about 760 people have solved it. So it's definitely like one of our easier ones, but I think it's got a bunch of people stuck. But it's basically we've got the hashes of all the 4-digit pins that are being used to secure each individual user's app. You give us those kind of 5 hashes, and you're asking us to kind of input like what are the 4-digit pins that you could find. So do you have any tips on how you
So
might go?
the tip I would give there is when you have to deal with a very small message space. So if it's just 4 digits, there's not too many options. So for computer is very fast. So you can start with 000 and then like 11111 and then just kind of like try to go through the combinations on your computer and that should help you kind of like get the answer and or like brute force all of the possible pins. So if you ever got more pins, more hashed pins from other executives, you would even know what those pins are because you already computed everything.
Hmm. Um, 3XD asks, like, is there any way that a non-programmer can solve like any of these?
The beauty, it's 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 a no, it's a yes and no question, but it's more no. It's yes in the sense that you can kind of define. So in a university exam, you could probably come clean with just writing how you would do it. And if you kind of write how we would do it, you would theoretically be right. You wouldn't necessarily get the pins right, but mostly, and what I look for the most is to get uh, people that have the intuition on how to break things, not so much the execution. Uh, in cryptography, execution often ends up being the easiest part.
Hmm.
It's always hard to code, but it's harder to get the design and to prove its security because then kind of like you already have the whole design done and it's not trivial to code it, but it's you already kind of have like a blueprint on what needs to be done and you already have the intuition on what's secure or not. But just to touch on this very, very quickly is I was at Financial Cryptography like 2 weeks ago. It's a big cryptography conference. And we were actually asking around like, oh, is there any cryptographic primitive that we could do on like pen and paper? Because you would not be able to do like a secret like signing with the CDSA. That would like that would take like too long. But is there anything you could kind of like quickly do on pen and paper? And we were then talking about like different things, mostly information theoretic stuff. So this is it's a very fun question. Even cryptographers talk about this in their free time.
Cool. And YH Nick 2 asks, will you guys be posting the answers and how you solved them, like at any point within this challenge? I think like even for folks who have given up by now or just are like, I'm never gonna be able to solve challenge 7 no matter how hard I work, like do you have sort of plans? Are you gonna reveal the magic behind the challenges that you've crafted?
So I think at least we're gonna reveal the intuition on how to solve everything. I have the code to
Hmm.
solve every single piece of like every single challenge we posted. I don't know if people want to see that or not. but we have it. Yeah, we can publish it for sure.
I'd say because this is ramping up and for XP, I would expect us not to be sharing the answers to this
Yes.
these challenges until after the Betanet quests are closed. But yeah, we'll draw up a sheet and make sure that we get those to you. I think we shared the answers to cryptography challenge number 1 as well once those quests went down. So yeah, I definitely think like doing that is awesome. And I think in general too, like all this feedback is super interesting. I think Mario and I are super excited and interested in like making the L1 Cryptography Challenge sort of like an annual thing that kind of grows with us as the platform and the community grows. So I think, any sort of feedback that you guys can give us about how these ones worked and the difficulty and like, all of that stuff, like we're definitely reading that and we'll take it into account for the next time around. But yeah, it's been super, super fun. Now we're about to kind of enter into open Q&A stuff. So if anyone has oh, okay. Actually, Ikaku Man has a good question for you. What is an ill message actually about for number 6?
So that one, I would I would try to go more with saying that sentence out loud. Rather, I know and see if that kind of like see how that sounds. And it will probably give you two options. So one is what is actually written there, and the other one is if you just say it out loud, you may come up with another type of message that would give you trouble in code.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that's as good as a tip can get. I'm sure people have talked on the cryptography channel about this for a bit, but that's basically the tip I can, yeah, a nail message. That's the best advice I can give. Just say it out loud.
Yeah, I'll say it one more time. An ill message. There we go. Ikaku Man also just asks, which area of math do you like the best, Mario?
That is a great question. I think I like just number theory in general. I think I like number theory. Mostly kind of like the discrete log, using the discrete log to do fun stuff with cryptography.
Hmm. And
So yeah, it's tricky question. Yeah.
Jack Overall asks, you mentioned that you have all sorts of interesting conversations and things about, cryptography and how it's used, and you and Neil hop on the phone to kind of talk it out. And I guess she's asking, like, how do I become a part of these conversations? Like, how can L1 community members like kind of get more involved in this like world that you're building behind the scenes for us at Lamina1, like outside of the cryptography challenge?
So you know what I'm thinking? We can start a channel called like cryptography brainstorming, and all kind of like the non-classified open problems we have can be put there, and then people can be a part of different designs and how you could go about solving them. I mean, that's because some of these things are actually like related with either mainnet launch or feature release. So it's kind of tricky to share with the community because it's also just brainstorming. So some of the stuff doesn't even see daylight because
Mhm.
maybe we think it makes sense, but then it doesn't really make sense a month down the line. Or maybe we think a design works very well, but then we actually break it a couple weeks down the line. So there's limited exposure there. But I think we can have, I mean, I don't know, we need to get green light internally, but I feel like that would make sense. We have a little Discord channel where cryptography enthusiasts can contribute and kind of see, okay, this is what a design would look like. And then we could even imagine writing a paper with the community. That would be pretty fun, right? We would have a little open problem there, and then collectively we would come up with a design, and then we would publish like a L1 community paper. That could be fun.
Yeah, totally. You know,
Extra XP to the authors.
yeah, right. Get some bonus packs in there. Yeah, awesome. Well, that's the questions we've got. We're a couple of minutes over our 45-minute window, but thank you all so much for joining us. I hope some of Mario's hints were helpful. I'm gonna post I've got a list of how many people have solved each challenge that I just updated while we were in the call. But yeah, it's looking like we've got about challenge number 2 seems to be our easiest with 837 solvers, and challenge 7 is by far hardest with only 204. So yeah, it's these are definitely tough, but as you can see, they are possible, and they are possible by a large swath of users. So everyone keep cracking at it. If you've got questions, definitely hop into the cryptography channel on our Discord. Mario definitely has been popping in and out, providing hints, helping people through stuff. I know several community members are working together to help crack and solve these problems, which we love to see. But if you share a secret code, we will find you. So, final warning from Stern Ivy. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. We wish you the best in completing. I will say, you've heard it here first, our next AMA is actually going to be going down next Friday, April 5th, with a special update from our CEO around our official mainnet launch plans. So definitely keep your eyes on our event invite list. Things are heating up. The cryptography challenge was just the beginning. So, as always, I'll keep you posted on our progress, well fed with quests. I will provide you as much transparency and information as I'm allowed to without breaking the cryptographic integrity of the entire network. And yes, the secret code for today's AMA is Crypto L1 with an exclamation point on. So for everyone joining, super easy XP for this that you don't have to encrypt. I promise you that the secret code is not encrypted in any way. You can
It's
just
not. It's not a challenge.
um, but yeah, thanks all so much for joining. I'll definitely make sure to post this on the L1 YouTube and also post a transcript for folks who want to kind of read more about these tips and want to dive a little bit deeper. But thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Mario. It's always a pleasure
Oh,
working
thank you.
with you. And yeah, more soon. Sounds like we've got a lot of fun crypto announcements that'll be coming out post mainnet. So awesome.
Absolutely. Amazing. Bye, everyone. Have a
Thanks.
great day.